Hi everyone, I'm here today to talk to you about all of the books that I read in February. I will list them in the description box down below. If you happen to be watching this the day that this goes up, I just wanted to mention an event I'm doing this week with Elle McNichol, who's the author of A Kind of Spark, which was one of my favourite books of last year. She's just published her second book, which is called Show Us Who You Are, and the book launch is on Wednesday. I'm hosting it. I'm going to be chatting with her about the book. It's over on the Blackwell's channels. I'll leave ticket details in the description box down below. As an aside, I don't normally talk about Patreon on here. It's just linked in the description box down below for anybody who would like to check it out. But I thought what I would do is what I do on Instagram, which is to very briefly mention it at the start of every month. And that's it. So it's the beginning of March. So just to quickly say that Patreon is a place where you can tip your favorite creators. So I support some of my favorite YouTubers, musicians, artists on there. You can make a one-off tip of $1, or you can sign up to do that every month if you would like to, and you can cancel at any time. If you enjoy my videos where I talk about the representation of disfigurement and disability, the history of fairy tales, all of the books, the baking, the vlogs, and you have the means to throw $1 in the tip jar, it would be amazing if you could consider doing so. The link is in the description box. There are some extra things over there, such as a book club, monthly writing prompts, close readings, behind the scenes writing stuff about future books, letters, lots of different things. But you can head on over there to find out more if you would like to. And if you don't want to, that is absolutely fine. Okay, let's talk about books. We are here to talk about all of the books that I read in February. You may remember at the end of January, I set myself a reading challenge to try and read an entire shelf on my bookcase in February. And I even said in that video, I do not know why I am picking the shortest month of the year, but I did. And I didn't succeed at reading all of those books. I think there were about 20 books that were unread on that shelf. But what I did enjoy about the process was limiting my TBR. I don't like doing that in general all the time because I'm definitely a mood reader, but having that focus for just a month of saying, okay, so most of the books I'm going to read this month, I am going to pick from this shelf, meant that I got to books that I wouldn't have probably got to for a while, and that was quite refreshing. So I got to about half of those. I'm also still in the middle of 3, which I will briefly mention. It's always frustrating when that happens at the end of a month. You want everything to be finished and all neat and tidy so you can talk about them in their entirety in a wrap-up, but life is not always neat and tidy, as we know. So let's talk about the books. The first book that I read is this one here. It's a non-fiction book, which wasn't actually from that shelf. This I read for work. It was one of my most anticipated books of the year. It's called 50 Sounds by Polly Barton. I have read many of Polly's books that she has translated from Japanese into English. I was looking for my most recent purchase, but I just realised the camera is sitting on top of it. So she is English, lived in Japan for a long time, learnt Japanese, and now translates for a variety of different companies, including Tilted Access Press, which is one of my favourite publishers. I write a monthly article for Toast magazine. They're a clothing company, but they also have a lifestyle magazine. And last month I wrote about translated fiction and Tilted Access Press. So this month I wanted to talk about 50 Sounds by Polly and interview her too. I'm not sure if that article is up yet, but when it is, I will link it in the description box down below. It was fascinating to talk to her about the process of translation and what that is like, how it feels like a kind of nurturing. She talks about many things in this book, her move to Japan and her learning of Japanese, though she's hesitant to use the word learning. She feels like it's a different kind of process, and she dives into that in lots of different detail using many different philosophical examples. Wittgenstein is someone that she talks about a lot. She refers to translation in this book as being the midwife of a text and helping it be birthed into the world, and I love that analogy so very much. She also talks about how in the process of writing this book, talking about her younger self, it's like she's translating a version of herself. She is trying to decide what would be the right language to give to that version of herself. how did that version of herself express herself? What did she think? And it's hard not to imprint your own views on that, which is something that you also have to think about when you're translating a piece of literature too. This is so far my favourite book of 2021. I found it fascinating. It is so superbly written. It is rich. It has so many elements to it, and I found it absolutely fascinating. So if you're interested in language, then I would recommend picking this one up too. Next, one of the books that I read was from that shelf, and this is The Alarming Palsy of James Orr by Tom Lee. This was a proof copy that I was sent a while ago from Granta, and it is about a man called James Orr who wakes up one day with Bell's palsy. So one side of his face is paralysed, and that is often temporary, or at least most of the time it is temporary, and it can be caused by all manner of things, one of those being stress. So he goes to the GP with his wife, and his GP says, you know, take some time off, probably going to be fine. But in the appointment, the GP is really talking to his wife and not to him. That is for a variety of reasons. One of those reasons is because he's struggling to speak, because he's adapting to the way that his facial muscles are now working. But it's also because the GP is clearly perhaps not uncomfortable with talking to him, but she's slipped into that patronizing tone that sometimes can happen when someone has a disability or a disfigurement, when someone doesn't speak to you anymore but over you. And I've certainly experienced that myself in my time. So I thought that the author really captured that very well, how people suddenly reacted very differently to him, friends, people out on the street, because he was looking different. And it's not only how they react differently to him, but how he is reacting differently to himself. It's such a sudden change to him when he looks at himself in the mirror. He has this distance from who he expects to see staring back. So I thought that the premise of that was really interesting, and obviously I want to read lots about that in fiction as someone who's very passionate about these things. But I felt like this book fell into an annoying cliche in that it was about a man who is becoming very bitter and angry because he's frustrated with the way things are not working out in his life. He was feeling those things anyway. He was already sleeping in a separate bedroom to his wife. They were going through lots of things. He's feeling a bit lost, having a bit of a midlife crisis. But it felt like the Bell's palsy was therefore a metaphor for the other things that were already going on in his life. It was a manifestation of how unsatisfying he was finding his existence. And he got almost a sadistic kick out of scaring people in the street, as if they could now see his true form. And I just, I don't know if I need to say much more if you've been here a long time. And it just builds up to this not very nice ending where he does something horrible because he hates the world. No, thank you. Next. Okay, next I read Ottessa Moshfegh's new novel, which is called Death in Her Hands. Ottessa is someone who really, unlike with the previous book, seems to get writing unlikable characters. It's not just one long extended metaphor with one particular image. She gets to the core of everything, and sometimes it's hard to look at because it's grimy and it's uncomfortable, and these characters that she writes think despicable things about other people, but it's very clear that we're not supposed to agree with them. So this is one of those. All of her characters are like that. If you've read Eileen, if you've read My Year of Rest and Relaxation, this is definitely my favourite though. So this is about a woman who lives on her own in the woods. It is a portrait of that witch who lives in the woods that everybody is scared of. She's called Vesta and she has a dog called Charlie. Her husband Walter has recently passed away and she's moved across the country, and she's trying to find her space both within herself and the landscape that she's now living in. And she goes for a walk in the woods one day and she finds a note. No body is attached to it, but it implies that there should be a body. It says, "Her name was Magda. Nobody will ever know who killed her. It wasn't me. Here is her dead body." And she becomes absolutely obsessed with this note. She wants to solve the mystery of who Magda was. And she paints this really visceral scenario in her head and she's solving this crime, filling in all of the blanks. She goes to the local library and she researches, how does one solve a crime? She's in her 70s, and one thing I would say about this book is that I didn't always believe that she was in her 70s, and that is possibly because the previous books of hers that I've read have had younger narrators and the voices sometimes feel quite similar. In the second half of the book, when she was talking more about her body and her movements, I could really feel that she was in her 70s, but before that I didn't quite believe it, and that felt like a shame, really. There's also a bit of a lull in the middle, and she does that thing where she references novels that are quite slow and how she doesn't like them and how she prefers it when they amp it up, and then she amps it up in this book. I find that a little bit cheesy, and I just wish that writers wouldn't do that. It makes me cringe every single time. I don't think I've ever found an instance where I've particularly enjoyed it. But aside from that, this book is so readable and you become so invested in wanting her to solve this mystery, this crime that you're not even sure happened. Did she write the note to herself and leave it out there? What is really happening? And I particularly enjoyed the instances where she comes across other people and is interacting with them, because the dialogue also felt extremely believable. And that was really where you got to see how other people must perceive her. That seems like a very obvious thing to say. But what I mean by that is that you can spend a large amount of the text with just her and her dog Charlie, and therefore her conspiracy theories seem more plausible because you're in that confined space. But then you suddenly get room to breathe because she'll interact with someone in a shop, or a policeman will speak to her, and you get that context again where you think, oh no, actually I shouldn't believe what she's saying because it's ridiculous. So I really loved how playful that was and sinister at the same time. This, I think, after 50 Sounds, is my second favourite book of the year, so again, would highly recommend. I read 3 middle grade books last month. My favourite was The Ice Bear Miracle by Burnell. Cerrie used to be a children's TV presenter, and now she mainly is a children's author, and I love her. She's great. This is about a young boy called Marv Jackson, who's also known as Marvel. He lives in the Arctic North, and when he was 5, he heard a cry out on the ice. So he went outside to investigate and was attacked by a bear. So he has a facial disfigurement, he has a scar on his face, and when he went out to see what that cry was, he swears that he saw a baby in a basket on the ice, but no one ever could figure out whether that was true, whether he was imagining things. The narrative is split between him, he's now 12 and he enjoys playing ice hockey, and every year this bear that attacked him comes back to see him, almost like it's apologising, and also between Tuesday, who is a performer in a circus who dances with an ice bear. So I love the duality of those stories and how they came together. Cerrie also always has great representation of disfigurement and disability in her books. Recommend. The next middle grade book that I read is called Where the Mountain Meets the Moon by Grace Lynn. This book is unapologetically slow. You go 2 paces and then you stop for a side story, and then you go another 2 paces and you stop for another side story. It's full of folktale, fairy tale, and I enjoyed how relaxed that made it feel, even though there is a pace to it as well, because it's about a girl who's going on an adventure. It's about a young girl called Min Lee who wants to go and find her fortune to help her family. And a lovely element of this book too is also that her family is very supportive of that. They want to rescue her and they want to help her. They don't want her to do it alone, but they're not, you know, the horrible parents who throw her out, which I love in fairy tales, don't get me wrong. You know that I love that. It's just refreshing to not see that too. There is that quote, I think it's Philip Pullman, who says, "It is a truth universally acknowledged that for a child to go on an adventure, we must first dispense of the parents." And that is true because the parents don't get to go with her, but it's done in a slightly different way to normal. I would have loved this, particularly if I'd read this when I was younger. It has all of that warm feeling to do with folktale that I adore so much. It's what drew me to fairy tales in the first place. But actually my favourite thing about this book is the illustrations, which are done by the author herself. Every so often you would get these wonderful colour plates, and I just want to put them up on my wall. I think they're absolutely stunning. The third middle grade book that I started reading was this one, which is Everyday Magic by Jess Kidd. This was an unsolicited proof copy that was sent to me, and whilst it's very, very fun, it's about a young boy called Alfie Blackstack who's sent to live with his aunts after his parents died. It just felt I don't know, a little bit formulaic. It reminded me of too many different children's books that I had already read. So I'm going to pass this one on to my nephew because I think that he will really like it. As I've said in other videos, sometimes I think there are children's books that transcend age and you can read them whatever age you happen to be. And some of them are just better to read when you're a kid, which is obviously fine because that's the target age group. And I feel like this one, for me, it is one of those particular books. So I'm going to give it to my 8-year-old nephew and I'm sure that he will love it. Another book that I picked up and then decided to put down, it wasn't for me, is Tirzah and the Prince of Crows by Deborah K. Davies. I spoke about this in a reading vlog that I uploaded last week, so if you would like to know why, you can head over there. Again, this book is not a book that I was reading and thought it was terrible. It just was very reminiscent of a book of hers that I'd already read and preferred. But if you would like to know more details, head over to that reading vlog. Then I read Record of a Night Too Brief by Hiromi Kawakami, and this is translated from Japanese by Lucy North, I think. Yes. This is a series of 3 different magical stories, heavy on the magical realism, great queer representation too. My favourite was definitely the first novella in here, and it reminded me a lot of Lily Huang, who's written a book called The Evolutionary Revolution, which is a reimagining of the beginning of the world using all of these different magical elements. It feels like you're wading through a dream, and that's what the first long story novella in here is like. It's a character who is living through this endless night and is carrying her porcelain girlfriend with her, trying to keep her close and having to absorb her into her body at different times. Sometimes she has to drink her, sometimes she has to keep her in a little box and keep her safe to her body. Sometimes she ends up being smashed and there's nothing that she can do about it, but then it starts again. It's like when you have an extended dream one night, but you keep waking up from it, and every time you go to sleep you go back into that dream and you're not really sure how to get out of it again. Also a little bit reminiscent of David Eagleman's Some, which is about different kinds of afterlife. It has that sort of quality to it and I absolutely loved it. The others in the book I didn't love as much, but I would say that this book is worth it just for that first story alone. I read a couple of picture books last month. This one is called Campbell by Raymond, Antrobus and Polly Dunbar, and this one is called What Happened to You, which is by James Catchpole, illustrated by Karen George. Both of these books are brilliant and they were on my most anticipated releases list. I spoke about both of these books in a video that I uploaded last week for World Book Day, where I was recommending books that have great representation of disability, deafness, visual differences and disfigurements. So I will link that video in the description box down below if you would like to go and find out more. I read a graphic memoir last month too, and this is called Dancing After 10 by Vivian Chong and Georgia Webber. The credit for this is slightly complicated. So this is a memoir about Vivian losing her sight after she had an allergic reaction to what they think was medication that she took, just normal everyday medication. She had a severe reaction to it, which has caused all kinds of problems. She had burns all over her skin. She also lost her sight and she wanted to write about that. And at some point she had a corneal transplant, which worked for a month or so, but then because it's her body producing scar tissue where it shouldn't, it failed after that again. So during that brief period where she could see again, she drew a lot. So there are pages in this book that contain her illustrations, which you can see here at the bottom and then here as well. And then she has paired with Georgia Webber, who is also a disabled artist, to rework the artwork and bring both of their styles together, and obviously her voice to tell her own story. And I find the collaboration work involved in this really, really fascinating. This is a book that will make you so angry. Get good friends, people. Have good friends, because she goes so angry. She goes to stay with a friend of hers and she has this allergic reaction to this medication that she was given, and her friend dumps her at a hospital and then she goes into a coma, and because he feels bad, he doesn't go back and see her. He just leaves her there and tells her family and friends that she's away on vacation because he doesn't want to tell them that he's not looking after her. Wow. Okay. It is extremely anger-inducing, and not only to do with that, but also the care system. Like sometimes she has amazing doctors and nurses and sometimes she doesn't. This feels like a very urgent book, and something that feeds into that, which I enjoyed, was that at the beginning of a memoir specifically, you may expect quite a bit of context for the author to sit down and say, okay, so I was born this time and these are the things that I do now, and this was my life before this particular thing happened that I would like to tell you about. But she doesn't do that. She doesn't grant you that context. She just jumps into this event that happened to her so that you have that element of horrific surprise that she had. Yes, she has context for herself and who she is, and you as a reader don't at the beginning, but it emulates that feeling of helplessness and feeling lost and trying to figure everything out in real time. And I thought that that worked really, really well. The colour palette reminded me a little bit of Persepolis by Marjane Satrapi. And again, the merging of the art styles, I think, is not only a brilliant way to incorporate both of their work, but also is a brilliant way to show the different emotions, because I feel as though George's illustrations are outlining the specific physical things that are happening in a particular room, and then Vivian's illustrations are more about how she's feeling about the situation, so you get that overlay, and that's really, really powerful. And then the three books that I am in the middle of, we have The Beauty of Your Face by Sahar Mustafah and The Paper Man by Gallagher Lawson, both of which I spoke about briefly in my reading vlog last week, which I'll link in the description box down below. And I'm also currently reading Passing by Nella Larsen. This is one of those classics that, because it's a classic and it's popular, it has several different audiobook versions, so you can pick your narrator if you want to listen to it, and I love that. Doesn't happen very often, so I've decided to listen to this one on audiobook. I am listening to it on audiobook, and the narrator that I picked is Tessa Thompson, and she's doing an amazing job, so loving that so far, and I'll speak about those in a future wrap-up when I have finished them. So those are all the books that I wanted to speak to you about today. I would love to know what books you read last month, any standouts, any books that you hope to love but perhaps didn't. Let me know in a comment down below. I hope you're having a great start to the week, and I will speak to you very soon. Lots of love. Bye.